The owner actually punched her in the face, and the police took her to jail. I'm going to continue on with my recap of Netflix series The Irregulars, Season 1, Episode 2, The Ghost of 221B. Okay, so this episode opens with a man coming home from work. I tried so hard not to call that man Moses. If you are familiar with the show Miss Scarlet and the Duke, then you'll know who I'm talking about. But he's on his way home, and his son was so excited he comes barreling down the stairs to show his father that he lost a tooth. And so his father, told him that, if you put that under your pillow, that the tooth fairy will come and take the tooth, but will leave money behind. So he was just too excited, right? So later that night, of course, he went to bed. He's expecting to wake up the next morning and have him a coin or two under his pillow. And so his mom, obviously they waited until he was asleep. And so his mom snuck into his room so she could take the tooth and put the money under his pillow. And then he whips around and you see all this blood on his pillowcase. And he don't have not nary a tooth in his head. So of course his mother about screamed, passed out. It was just a whole hot mess. So that's how this episode opened, right? So in the next scene, B is in the market and she's kind of see the goings on and people are kind of milling about. People are selling, people buying, people talking. And so she felt like people were distracted enough. And so she tried to steal, I believe it was a watch, but she didn't get very far. The owner actually punched her in the face and the police took her to jail. So that was her day. And so while she was in jail, Dr. Watson came in and basically told her that, she had been avoiding him and that he had a new case. And she basically told him that she doesn't want to work for him and nobody does.
I don't want to work for you. None of us do.
And so he basically told her that if he leave the jail, without them having some type of agreement that she's going to take the case, that she's going to go before, I guess, the magistrate, I guess it would be, and she's going to end up in the workhouse. And so if, you're familiar with, if you've seen episode 1, then you know exactly how she feels about that. She came from the workhouse. She ain't trying to go back. So, Leo, he's all decked out and he's ready to leave the house. She's ready to hit the town. And so Delmer, okay, so you'll have to forgive me in episode 1. I kept calling him Mr. Bannister, but his name is actually, I'm probably still pronouncing his name wrong, Delmer. He stopped him and basically wanted to know, okay, so where are you off to? And so he said, I believe he said Louise is at the palace and, I was going to go there and spend a few days with her.
Louise is at the palace. I've decided to spend the next few days with her. And
he basically said that, no, it's probably not a good idea for you to leave. Especially, he didn't say this, but they was like, no, not after your all-nighter. It's probably a good idea for you to stay, for safety reasons. And so then Leo's sister basically came in and told him that he was a stick in the mud.
Really, Demi, you are such a stick in the mud.
And that, that basically she'd be responsible and, certainly she's going to make sure that he's okay.
I think I'm quite capable of making sure he's all right.
And she escorted him out. And so Watson and B are in a tavern and he's going over the case with her. And he's basically saying that they're children who basically are having their teeth pulled out.
Children's teeth are being stolen.
And that he's already spoken to 2 of the victims and they've agreed to speak with him. And he even said that the police log showed a sighting of a ghostly woman. And so, of course, they need to investigate that.
The police logs, there were sightings of a ghost lady on the night in question.
And B ends up saying that, my sister keeps saying that people are getting these powers from somewhere. And she basically asked him if that was true.
My sister says she thinks people are getting strange powers from somewhere. Is that what's going on?
And he basically told her that she should focus on the case at hand. And that she shouldn't basically asking questions that she couldn't possibly comprehend. So he is just working overtime and being just a jackass to her. So B is back with Spike, Billy, and Jesse, and Spike is basically saying, I am not breaking into 221 B, right? And she is basically saying that if we're going to be working for this man, I want to know, why, who he is and what he does and why we're working for him, basically.
If he's going to force us to work for him, then I'm going to find out everything I can about him and his business partner.
And Spike was like, I'm just not, he was like, I'm not doing it. I'm not feeling it. I don't want to do it. And then eventually she said, okay, fine. Either you're going to break into the house or you're going to help us on the case.
Either you break into 221B or you help us with the job.
And so obviously he opted to do the break-in. So Billy, Jesse, and B, they leave. They're now on their way to start the investigation. They're on their way to, investigate these sightings and interview the victims. And I guess at this point, Billy worked up the courage. He felt like he was going to, he was going to tell her how he felt about her. And then, of course, who shows up? Leo.
Bumble. Good afternoon.
So, of course, neither of them are happy, but for, I guess, different reasons, maybe. And so he walked up and he asked, what's going on? And, of course, Jesse told him that they're investigating a new case. And, of course, he, said that he would, would like to help. And, B was upset that he kind of dipped out. He really didn't say anything. And, they hadn't heard from him. And so she basically told him that he could help Billy with the interviews. And of course, Billy wasn't happy with that. And Leo wasn't either. He was hoping that he was going to be able to spend some time with B, doing whatever she was going to do. And she basically told him that he could either help Billy with the interviews or piss off. And she walked off.
Well, you thought wrong. Either help with the interviews or piss off.
So he's trying to figure out, like, okay, what happened? What did I do? So at the girls' school, you see a couple of the students are talking about what happened. And one of the little girls was like, well, it seems like if, one of your teeth fall out, then the lady comes and she takes them all.
When one of your teeth falls out, it can smell it. It concentrates the rest of them out of your mouth when you're asleep.
And so as they walked off, you saw the little cute girl behind them, and she was standing there all concerned and scared, right? And so she's now in her room and she's praying.
Dear God, please don't let my tooth fall out.
I'm basically praying it because she has a loose tooth at this point and she doesn't want her tooth to come out, especially right now. And so she said a little prayer, and unfortunately, no sooner did she say her prayer, her tooth it just fell out. So poor thing is just terrified. She's in bed. She's not trying to sleep. And, she's hearing, every noise means something. The wind, going up against the window, like, it's just freaking her out, right? So eventually she got out of bed and she went to go look out the window, and you see the silhouette kind of breeze by. So of course it scared her. And she went to tell her mom, and, she woke up, and when the mom turned around, she ain't had no teeth in her head.
I think there's something outside.
So of course that was confusing because, you under the impression that, okay, she's only taking the tooth of the children who are in the process of losing their teeth. So, B and Jess are, while Leo and Billy are doing the interviews, Jess and B are investigating the sightings. And so they decide, or at least Jesse decided they should separate and they should be back up in 30 minutes. So while Jess is, I guess, going in her direction, the direction she chose, she ends up seeing the little boy from the intro where he was the first person you saw who lost all his teeth. But something was different about him. So she saw the little boy, and he briefly smiled a little creepily, and you see he had all his teeth. And it's like, wait a minute, that child, how in the world does he have teeth? And so, of course, he ran off, and of course, she followed. And she continued to follow him, and eventually she passed this sign that said David Gates Dentistry. It used to be a dentist office over in that area. And so as she, continued to walk through, she saw this woman. This woman was burying something. And she could still see the little boy, and she was like, oh, well, there you are. So she starts talking to the woman, and she's saying that, there's been some, strange occurrences in this area. And then the woman's like, are you talking about the teeth or the tooth fairy or something to that effect? And she said yes. And so she ends up inviting her in for tea. And so for some odd reason, she followed the strange woman into this building. So they get up to the top of the stairs, and she's asking her about, she was asking a question about something, and then this woman whips around and blows something in her face that knocks her out. So, Billy and Leo, they're en route to go interview Carla and Nora Macon. And Leo can sense the tension, and so he basically asked, is there a reason that, you guys are upset with me?
Are people angry at me for some reason, Billy?
And Billy was basically like, he really wasn't trying to get into it right then. And so they get to, it looks like a hotel or something. I'm not sure where they were. And while they were standing in line, Leo said, well, if you're upset with me, I'd rather you just come out and say it. And he basically, again, brushed it off. He didn't really want to say too much. And then he started talking to Nora. Carla is Nora's daughter, she's the little girl who lost her teeth. And she's basically saying that, they don't really know what, she don't really know what happened. Leo was asking her, like, okay, so your daughter lost her tooth last night and put it under a pillow. And then she says, well, no, she lost all her baby teeth, a few years ago. And so these were her permanent teeth. And now she has to wear dentures, and she's 9 years old and having to wear dentures.
Wait, so it just came and took her teeth at random?
It took all her adult set. And
so again, it's like, okay, but we already knew that from the mom, where she had her teeth pulled. So it's like, okay, what, you're trying to make the connection between why you have this adult and then you have these two children who've now, gone through had this experience. So we flash to Spike. Spike is sitting outside of 221B, and of course he's waiting for Dr. Watson to leave. He eventually leaves, and he broke in. He's now going through the drawers, and he actually finds this letter that's addressed to Watson. And it mentioned some organization, and of course he's like, well, what the hell is that?
Dear John, it has come to my attention that the members of the Golden Dawn.
So of course, while he's doing that, someone came home, and now he's trying to find out where, he's trying to find a place to hide. So he ends up hiding under the bed. This person walks in, kicks their shoes off, jumps in the bed, plays the violin, vomits, and we'll soon passed out. So while, all the while he's under this bed, you're trying to figure out how he's going to get out. So we flash back to Jessie and the woman. The woman is now in her, I guess, true form, or she clearly looks different. And so Jessie's tied to this chair, and this woman has some instrument, like she's about to pull out Jessie's teeth. We flash to B. B is because Jessie never came back to the meetup spot, so of course she's now out looking for her. And of course she walks the same path. She passed the same sign with the the David Gates Dentistry, the sign that was same sign that Jessie had passed earlier, and got there just before this woman was about to jam this thing into her mouth. And she put a knife to her throat and pulled the woman away from Jessie, and of course got untied Jessie from the chair.
Back.
So Leo and Billy arrive at the second victim, which would be the Coopers. This would be the family from the intro. And Mr. Cooper came to the door, and he didn't even give Billy a chance to say much of anything. He accused him of being a beggar.
Gonna beg somewhere else.
Not a beggar.
Which of course offended Billy. Billy is trying to tell him that I'm not a beggar, that I'm trying to investigate. That he's trying to investigate what's going on, and he don't really care what he's trying to investigate. And Leo's like, well, what is that supposed to mean? And then he kind of looks at Leo, and he's like, do I know you? And of course Leo is like, no, you don't know me. And And then he ends up asking Leo, like, why are you hanging out? Why is basically a young man of your caliber hanging out with this basically street rat? And so, of course, that set Billy off, and Billy got in his face, and then basically Mr. Cooper was like, you know, I'd like to see you try it. I'd like to see it. Like he said, he had served time in the military, and then he works as a bodyguard, and basically he's telling Billy, like, I really wouldn't do that if I were you. Like, you don't stand a chance not here. And so Billy, you know, Leo kind of stepped in to kind of try to defuse the situation. Billy walked off, and then he turned around and basically said that the reason that I'm on the streets is because my father was in the army too. The only difference is he never came home.
I'm only on the streets because my dad was in the army too. He wasn't lucky enough to come home.
And he walked off. Mr. Cooper couldn't even be bothered to care, and he just went on in the house, took his son in the house, and closed the door. So we flash back to Jesse and B, and Jesse is basically saying that she had breathed something on me that basically caused her to pass out. And B is like, it seems like, you know, these powers are warping, these new powers are warping individuals, and then she ends up going into another room, and then she comes out and she calls Jesse's name like she just found something. So Spike has been able to get from under this bed. He ends up having to go through that vomit. But he makes his way downstairs, and then he saw like this curtain off to the side. Of course, he walked in, he saw all of these kind of statues, these antiques, and then he saw this map. It looks like they were tracking something, and then he saw this Ouija board, and this skull, and he's like confused, like, okay, so what the hell is going on here? And then we flash back to Jess and B, and we realize that when she went into the room, she saw a Ouija board. So Jessie decides that she's going to try the same thing with her that she did with Arthur. She's going to try to go into her memories, try to figure out who she is and how does she, you know, basically she's trying to figure out how she got her powers. And so the first vision was of her. She was with this Ouija board, and it was basically the same process that you saw with Arthur, where the glass was moving all around, and then she touched the board, and then it lit up, and she became imbued with these powers. And then the next memory was someone had died, and he found out that it was her father was murdered. And she's basically asking her, Jesse's asking her about how she got these powers. And the woman was basically like, get out of my head, get out of my head. She kept telling her, get out of my head. And then she grabbed Jesse. And then there was this whole tussle and, you know, all this, you know, visual distortion. And then we end up going back into Jesse's past when her and B was at the workhouse. And this guy ends up pushing Jessie into this glass, and she hit her head and she cut her forehead. And of course B intervened, and then he grabbed B and he was about to beat her. And then the woman basically said that, you know, was basically like, okay, if we're going to start, don't, you know, asking people to remember things when you yourself ain't ready to face, you know, things from your past as well.
Don't play a game of remembrance if there's things you tried to forget.
And so Jessie ends up grabbing her, and they're back in present day. So we flash back to Leo and Billy, and of course Billy is still upset over the situation that just happened with Mr. Cooper, and Leo, you know, trying to talk to him, and he basically blows up and saying, this is why, you know, we don't like people like him and like you, because you guys treat us like trash.
People like him, people like you treat us like that.
And he ends up telling Leo that, you know, it's guys like you who are so posh and so rich that life is boring, and basically you find excitement in slumming it with the common folk, with the poor folk. And then he made the comment about how you guys use poor girls, how you use them and then you discard them like trash.
You can sleep with a poor girl. You can just use them and dump them back in the gutter.
And that upset Leo, because you get to feel that he really does like B, and he as he was, about to respond to him, because at this point Leo walked off, he was trying to catch up with him, his leg kind of gave out and he had to sit down.
You don't know anything about...
And of course Billy was like, hey, what is going on with you? And he ended up pulling his pants leg up and his leg was bright red, like it was bruised. And of course Billy was like, why didn't you say something? And he was like, because I don't want to be the person that slowed you guys down from doing the investigation. And it was, yeah, so they talked, and I think they talked and they came to an understanding, basically. Okay, so Jessie eventually leaves. She went to go find Leo and Billy, and B stayed behind. And so the woman starts talking to B and then talking to her about how they're not that different. And
I see you because you and I are the same.
Of course, B is like, I don't really know what you're talking about. And she, was like, well, what if someone killed your mother and you basically, what if someone wronged you and you had a way of rectifying the situation? And of course, B is saying that, she wouldn't do that. She wouldn't go, she would want to, but she wouldn't act on it. And, she was saying that I saw you in the workhouse and how you're not that different from me, and how, basically your parents, died too. And basically she talked about how, the things in their lives, things in, someone's life creates monsters and turns them into monsters. And she's like, monsters create monsters. And she's trying to get B to acknowledge the fact that, she has demons of her own. And so of course the woman starts talking about, her father, how her father worked, he put his blood, sweat and tears into building that business.
My father worked his whole life to build this business.
It's only to have it taken away from him because of the soil, or because of the land that the building was on.
And for it to be taken away because of the dirt it was built on.
How basically she's going to make them all pay. So Jessie, Leo, and Billy arrive at the building, and Jessie saw something, and so they all go over and they're trying to figure, okay, what the hell's going on here? So they end up calling B to come out, and you saw this skull that it was like it was growing into a person, right?
It looks like it's alive, like it's growing, like the skull is growing from the teeth.
And so while they're talking, you saw this arm come up out of the ground. Billy saw it first, and then they turned to see what the hell was going on. And then you saw the little girl, who they recognized as Carla Macon, and then of course you saw the little boy, who Mr. Cooper's son. And so this when they realized that she's taking these teeth and she's cloning these people. And so now it's like, why is she doing that? And so they started talking, and they realized that she was talking about Duke Winchester, and Leo was like, well, he's the richest man. He's one of the wealthiest men in the country. And there's like, so why would she have a vendetta against him? And how did these kids fit in? And Leo was like, well, because he's one of the richest men in the country, he's never without security. He always has a bodyguard. And then they flash back to when Billy and Mr. Cooper had their little, tete-a-tete. And Mr. Cooper was like, he was in the military, and now he works as a bodyguard.
I'm a retired captain of the British Army and a professional bodyguard.
And so that's why his son was chosen. And then they say, okay, so what's the significance with Carla Macon, the little girl? And then Leo says, well, the Duke puts on this variety show every year, and it's supposed to happen tonight. And then you're like, okay, but that's not answering why he chose the little girl. And so now Billy's now trying to get to the theater to prevent them from, I guess, assassinating the Duke. So we flash to this horse and carriage. We see Mr. Cooper. He's, looking at the time. And of course, he's in the the Duke Winchester's in the carriage with him. He's basically saying, we're going to arrive at the theater in about 5 minutes. And the Duke really wasn't all that into it. He was like, I'd rather just go, go have a pint. And they kind of laughed a little bit about that.
About 5 minutes to the Hippodrome, Your Grace.
And then you find out why they chose Carla. So her and her mom worked, they worked at the event. Carla was one of the people that would walk around with the trays. I guess they would have the little snacks and drinks and all that stuff, and people could pay for it and get the stuff off the little thing. And so Carla went in the back, I guess, to stock up her little tray, and that's when the clone Carla walks in, and of course Carla saw her, and then we flash to the clone in Carla's uniform walking through the crowd. And then we also find out that clone Carla got a little pistol that she's now hidden on the little tray. And then when she saw that her mom was distracted, she slipped off to the side, and she was able to let Mr. Cooper's son, the clone Mr. Cooper's son, into the side door. So shortly before, I guess, Duke Winchester was supposed to go in, you saw the clone son. He injured himself. He stabbed himself in the leg, and so he wanders in, or stumbles in, and of course his father grabs him, and of course Duke Winchester is all kneeled there. They're trying to figure out what's going on with this kid, and you can kind of see his face, you can see Mr. Cooper's face, because he's looking at this boy who's all frowned up and all squinched up, and he's like, wait a minute, this child got teeth, but he didn't say nothing at the time. So we flash back to the woman, Jesse B and Leo, and of course Leo's trying to B is trying to tell her that this isn't the way. I know how you feel. I never knew my dad. My mom died when I was a kid, and then she ends up asking her, well, how did your mom die? And you can kind of see Jesse kind of perk up, because I don't know whether or not she ever knew the real story behind what happened to her mom, their mother. And so she said that, my mother, she had mental problems, and she had a habit of wandering off. And one night she wandered off and she fell into the lake, basically, and she drowned. And of course, B was like, well, the Duke, Leo told me that Duke Winchester has a daughter also. And like you said before, monsters create monsters. So what do you think is going to happen? If you carry this out, what do you think is going to come of her? And she thought about it for a while, and she said that there's only one way to stop this from happening. And B wasn't ready to make that decision. But basically what she's saying, that the only way to stop this from happening is to kill me. And B is like, she is not ready to cross that line. So Duke Winchester, they announce him. He walked out. He's talking. He's on the floor. Clone Carla walks out on the stage, and she ends up pulling the pistol. People are ducking and dodging, and she's able to speak. Woman's able to speak through Carla, and basically talked about the past and how she was only how young she was. She was 16, I think, something like that. And when he decided to raise the rent on all his tenants, and of course they couldn't afford to pay. And basically this is basically for my father. And while this is going on, you got Billy trying to talk to Mr. Cooper, basically telling him that that's not your son, how it's a clone. And he basically told him that you just check the teeth, just look at the teeth, because obviously he knows that his son doesn't have any teeth. And so it all happened so fast. So Cooper, he's able to run in. He ends up knocking Duke Winchester down just before she pulls the trigger. Billy is able to, get the gun away from her, and they kind of, it ain't really take 3 guys to subdue old little clone Carla, but that's basically what happened. He got the gun, and it was 2 guys that was holding her. And so at this point, they feel like, okay, crisis averted. And so as they were, Jessie, B was, I forget where she was going, but Leo took this time to talk to her, and basically, you know, he apologized for, you know, he was like, after everything that we'd gone through, for me to just leave that way was completely rude, and, you know, he apologized.
I shouldn't have just left like that after all we've been through. It was rude of me, and I apologize.
And, you know, she basically said that, we barely know each other, so where you go isn't really my concern. And he was like, well, no, I just wanted to let you know that, you know, I'm not a dabbler, is what he said. And that, you know, I like you. And then she was kind of smiled, and then he meant to say he liked her, but then I think he thought it was a little too awkward. Then he changed it, was like, well, I like all of you. And, he said, you know, believe it or not, you know, I'm just like you guys. And of course she was like, well, you're not like us. Tonight I'm going to basically some crappy cellar. That's where I live. That's where I'm going to be sleeping tonight. Where are you sleeping tonight?
I'll be sleeping in a damp, shitty cellar tonight.
And so this is when they realized, this is when Jessie came in, and she told him that she looked out the window. Now remember, there was another clone in the process, and so she looked out and saw that space was empty, and that clone, whoever it was nowhere to be found. So they have no idea who this third person is.
Looked out the window, and the teeth, the skull, the one that was growing still, it's not on the ground anymore, it's gone.
So they go back into the room, and of course she is not giving anything away. And then you remember that it was the little girl's mother. Remember when she went down and the mom, all her teeth were gone? So at this point, Mr. Cooper has locked Duke Winchester, his daughter, and his wife in a room. And he basically requested that Billy stay in the room with them. And so Billy ends up introducing himself to the mom.
I'm Billy. I'm working with your husband's security detail.
Nice. And eventually all hell breaks loose. She pulls out a knife. She ends up stabbing Duke Winchester. At this point, you think that he's dead. So now it's this whole tussle going on. She's going after Billy. It's like a fight now between, where now B's hand is being forced, because it's like if she don't do anything, Billy, they're going to lose Billy. And so she made the tough decision, and she ended up killing the woman. And as no sooner than she killed the woman, then the clones kind of, I guess, dropped dead. They were just so creepy looking. And so you end up seeing the three clones just laid out with their eyes all bugged out, just looking, anyway. But then you flash to B, and she is devastated. You can see it's just one more, traumatic experience to pile on to all of the other ones that she's already experienced. So later, that evening, they're back in their alley, and they're just talking. And Leo was like, it's like B deserves better than this. And of course, Billy got offended, like, you don't even know her, so how do you even know, who are you to say what she deserves? And then of course Billy starts asking him, how do you know so much about Duke Winchester? And so Leo was like, oh, everybody knows about him. And he was like, well, I don't, and nobody that I know knows that much about him. So now he's questioning, like, who are you really? Because at this point they really don't know who this guy is. He just basically showed up out of nowhere. So Leo went over to talk to B, and I guess just to make sure that she was okay. Then you flash to Jessie. Jessie is asleep, and she's having another nightmare. She's back in the cave. Of course, the guy appears, and then the butterflies appear again, and she's now back talking to the man in Louisiana. And he ends up giving her like this butterfly tattoo, because he was like, he experienced that as well, the nightmares, and he was telling her that anytime she's experiencing the nightmares, all she has to do is touch it, and it'll wake her up or pull her out of the nightmare.
In the nightmare, hold your wrist here
And you leave it.
And then she starts telling him about how, you know, she did what he asked as far as touching people to try to find out where the power came from. And she basically said that it seemed like, you know, she couldn't like pinpoint where it was coming from, but it seemed like it was like a free-for-all. Like anybody who had access to it could get it. And so he started explaining to her what was going on, how there are barriers that keep delivering from our world from the spirit world, and the only time that you even cross those barriers is either when you're being born or when you die. But there's a rip somewhere that's allowing people to pull power from the other side, and it's causing this rip to get bigger and bigger. And he basically told her the only way to stop this from happening is to repair the rip. And so now at this point they have to find the rip.
You need to find
the rip. If we find it, then we might be able to close it.
And so she's saying that he told her that it's in London. And so then Spike starts talking about, you know, 221 Baker Street and how he saw this room that had all these statues and looked like there was this shrine and
had all these weird markings on it, and it was in this weird room. It was like a temple or something.
He ends up giving B the letter that he found that was addressed to John Watson, Dr. Watson, and she ain't waste no time. Next, you know, she's power walking down the street. She found this address. She went down some stairs. Apparently, the guy that they didn't let her in, and she makes it all the way downstairs. This man is sitting at a desk, and he already knew her. Like, he called her by her first name, and of course, she's like, "How do you know me? And who are you?" And he introduced himself as Holmes, and of course, he said Mycroft Holmes.
Holmes. Mycroft Holmes.
And that's pretty much how this episode ended.